Hello, everyone. Firstly, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. My name is Molly from the marketing team here at Poppulo. So I'd like to welcome you all to our webinar today on the top internal comms trends of 2023. This webinar is sure to be an interesting one with some great topics for discussion, and I hope you will enjoy and have some tangible key takeaways at the end. So just a couple of housekeeping notes before we begin. We're currently using the Zoom platform, so feel free to use the chat function to enter any questions or comments you may have throughout the conversation, and we'll save time at the end to get to as many as we possibly can. And after the webinar, we'll send out a recording and the slides to all attendees. So just a little bit about Poppulo. So Poppulo is the leading communications and workplace experience software company. With Poppulo's Harmony platform, communicators can publish and measure targeted personalized content across email, digital signage, mobile, Microsoft Teams, SharePoint, and more, all from a single platform. Once those comms are deployed, our robust analytics help ensure your teams are using the channels most relevant to your audiences, boosting productivity and engagement. We work with thousands of companies in over 80 countries, as well as nearly half of the Fortune 100, supplying enterprise-grade solutions to build a more meaningful conversations with the people who matter most. So now onto our panel. We have a very exciting panel joining us today. So I'd like to introduce you all to Joss Mathieson from Change Oasis, Sharon Macintosh from And Then Comms, and our very own Eoin Byrne from Poppulo. Joss, would you like to start off by introducing yourself?
Yeah, thanks very much, Molly, and hello, everyone. As Molly says, I'm Joss Mathieson. I'm Chief Encouragement Officer at Change Oasis. I'm a change coach and consultant. I help leaders, teams, and organizations to thrive through uncertainty that we face. And my background is leading communications teams for over 2 decades in big global organizations like Barclays and GSK. I'm based in the UK, but I work with clients all over the world, and very excited to be part of this today. Sharon, over to you.
Hey, Joss. Yeah, I just want to echo how excited I am to be with everyone today. Whether you're starting with your first coffee in the morning or you're ending with your espresso at night, internal comms folks are absolutely my favorite people to be around because they're so passionate about what they do. A little bit about me. My background is in corporate communications. I came from waste management, Sears, most recently at PepsiCo, where I was VP of Global Internal Communications, serving about 270,000 employees worldwide. And then I kind of came to a crossroads. My mom was dying of Parkinson's, and that's how And Then Communications was born. It was named after her amazing storytelling capabilities. And I am focused on change communications, employee communications, and executive communications. And most recently, I just became a certified coach. So I've been coaching communicators as well, which has just brought me so much joy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Eoin Byrne. I guess I'm on home turf today. It's a pleasure to join you. I'm the Chief People Officer here at Poppulo. I want to start by saying thank you to the great team at Poppulo for putting on this webinar. I'm very excited to engage you all on some very important topics starting out 2023. A little bit about myself. I run the people function and the internal comms function here at Poppulo. Before here, I was Chief HR Officer at Lidl, one of the leading global food retailers here in the United States. I'm based in Washington, DC. My undergraduate study, where I started out, I guess my educational professional journey, was in communication studies. And ever since, I've been involved in employee engagement and internal comms across many different markets. So I'm very happy to have landed at Poppulo relatively recently, starting the end of August last year, because I've really found a home where I can do what I really love in terms of people operations and engagement and internal comms. So excited to join you all today.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Owen. As you can tell, high caliber panel that we have today, and I think it's going to be a fascinating discussion. So what's our agenda for today? Well, let's give you a bit of a sense of what we're doing. We're going to be talking about trends, internal communications trends, and hopefully that's going to be really useful for you. We're going to talk about the challenges that presents for all of us who work in internal communications. A lot about change. We know change is not just constant, it's accelerating. So we'll be talking about that. How can we do a better job of that? And then we'll wrap up the panel discussion by talking about actually, how can we have the biggest impact? How can you have the biggest impact on the organizations that you work for? And then we'll have a big chunk of time at the end, 15, 20 minutes or so, to hear from you, hear your questions. So great to see you all using the chat already. We can see what a diverse audience we've got joining us on the live. Everyone from North America, South America, Africa, Europe. It's probably the wrong time zone when we're going out for Asia, but I'm sure there'll be people joining on demand there too. So before we get into the panel discussion, we'd actually like to run a quick poll. So we'd like to get you involved early. So we'd like to hear from you. Actually, what are the which of these trends are you really keeping an eye on this year? And this is multiple choice, so pick as many as are relevant to you. If you want to pick them all, that's fine. Equally, if you want to just pick out, the top one or two, that's cool too. So if you can let us know what you think, it'd be really interesting, and we can shape some of our conversation to reflect what you've got there. So thanks for all of you while you're doing that. Thanks for all of you in the chat. Amazing to see the places that you're joining us from. I see, quite a few from Europe, quite a few from Canada, US, Costa Rica. I've seen Colombia. I've seen hot South Africa. So India even. So amazing. What a diverse audience we've got. So last couple of seconds just to respond to the poll. Let us know, what are you focusing on this year? What's keeping you awake, or what's got your eye? Is it burnout? Is it retention? Is it economic outlook? Is it changes happening in your organization? Is it technology, things like artificial intelligence and chat GPT? Is it efforts to align with business strategy? Maybe it's downsizing, layoffs, or maybe it's building culture in a hybrid environment. So last call, let us know your votes. Okay, let's have a look. What are the poll results? Be interesting to see what you said. Okay, right, quite a lot of votes here for culture. That's quite interesting. Alignment, business strategy, change, retention, but quite a lot also for burnout, the economy. Not so much on downsizing. Maybe that's a good sign. Sharon, let me ask you, what do you take away from that? What sort of flavor is that representative of what you're hearing from your clients?
It is what I'm hearing. Yeah, definitely. We're still dealing with this hybrid environment. That doesn't surprise me. I do think this is the year that it finally, leaders finally realize that it's here. It's interesting on the downsizing, because I would say your internal communicators know more than anyone if something's going to be happening in the organization. So I really trust that. And that's really interesting.
Yeah. Owen, anything that surprises you about what you see in the poll results there?
I'm obviously in a tech company and very focused on the tech space right now. I'm encouraged to see the downsizing be so small. I think we lose sight of that, right? The tech workforce is not, a huge part of the global workforce. So that's the first takeaway for me. We know that building a culture in a hybrid environment, that really speaks to something we talk about all the time at Poppulo whenever we're engaging our customers, supporting our customers. We have to understand the importance of internal comms professionals and internal comms infrastructure in terms of what a hybrid environment actually is. And I mentioned to you guys when we chatted last week that I don't normally quote or take inspiration from Elon Musk, but when he talked about Twitter, when they were looking at the acquisition, he keeps calling it the digital town hall, the digital town square. And actually your internal comms platform is your digital town hall. You have to invest in internal comms people and infrastructure.
Yeah, and we'll come back to that because I'm sure that's going to be a theme that will come up when we talk trends. Okay, great. Thank you all for taking part in the poll. Really useful for us to get a sense of what's on your minds. And we are here to talk 2023 trends. So I'd love to get into it. As I say, please, make sure you use the Q&A function. We'll come back to that. Let us know, if things resonate with you as we're talking, as you're listening, put that in the chat as well. We'll keep an eye on that. But because we're here to talk trends, I'd love to jump into it. And the first thing I'd like to ask you both is, so going into 2023, we're in it now. I can't believe we're at the end of January. That's gone so quick already. But what are the key trends that you're expecting to see in terms of internal comms, and how is that a shift from maybe what we saw last year? Eoin, maybe I can come to you first.
I think whenever we consider the difference from last year, last year we were focused also on burnout, but I'm really surprised to see a recent survey from AFLAC that says nearly 60% of American workforce or workers are experiencing at least a moderate level of burnout. Now, we know that's not a US specific trend. We know that employees are burning out because of many different reasons, often lingering topics from the pandemic. When we look internally at what type of information are being published on our platforms in organizations, we see an opportunity there to really ramp up the type of topics that help employees through topics or to avoid burnout, right? Or how to get through that. Topics like wellness and topics like recognition. We're not really seeing organizations pick up the pace in terms of focusing on recognition, because for us, certainly internally at Poppulo, it's a topic that we're leaning into heavily, because the work can be really difficult and it can lead to burnout. But if we're acknowledging it, right, we're recognizing it, we're thanking people for their efforts, and we're simply acknowledging that times are tough for tech companies in terms of downsizing, for lots of different companies as a lag from the pandemic. Making sure that we focus on the topic of recognition, I think, is a trend that's going to be extremely important throughout 2023.
Yeah, so basic human need to be understood, but also to be valued, isn't it? And then we've got to look after each other. It's not easy. We'll come on to talk about change later. We know that's everything's moving faster. It's, I saw a stat from Accenture, actually, something they released at Davos. They do a thing called the disruption index. Pre-pandemic, they were saying the level of disruption year on year was about 5%, which doesn't sound very much. Post-pandemic, they say it's up 200%. Which is an absolutely startling statistic about actually how much disruption is happening in the environment and in the organizations working. Technology plays a big part of that too. So yeah, thanks for that. Burnout, definitely something we need to pay attention to. Sharon, what about for you? What do you think some of the key trends in 2023 are going to be for internal communicators to keep an eye on?
Absolutely. And Owen, I'll build on your burnout trend as well. My guess is many of you on this webinar today or who are rewatching it are feeling burnout yourselves. And I'm seeing it in my coaching clients, just because the disruption that you just mentioned, Joss, the Collins Dictionary word of the year in 2022 was permacrisis. Like, how many of us feel permacrisis? So I just want to acknowledge that it's the internal communicators are sort of dealing with burnout as they're sort of dealing with burnout in their organizations, both personally and organizationally. But I'm really seeing three trends, and I think we'll get into the first two in our later conversation. But the first trend is about intentional partnerships and co-creation, and how critical that is as we realize this new hybrid environment, so that things aren't sort of happening organically. So internal communicators really need to go out and build those partnerships. The second one, which I know is going to be a big part of our change discussion, is enrolling leaders and people managers in particular as internal communicators. So helping them do what all of you do better than anybody else. And then the third one I'd like to just spend a couple of minutes talking about is AI as PT, or artificial intelligence as a productivity tool. And it was on the poll. It wasn't one of the ones that came up to the top. That doesn't surprise me, because it's a 60-day-old trend. ChatGPT was just released on November 30th. If you haven't heard of it, it's been in the news, and I've had my clients are starting to ask me, like, whoa, is this going to actually affect my job? Is this going to change what I do? I don't think this year it will. I think in the future it could. So briefly, what is ChatGPT? So it's an artificial intelligence tool that uses human language. So that's the big differentiator for it. You think about how fast this thing grew. Facebook took 10 months, ChatGPT took 5 days to get to 1 million users. So that's how crazy fast it is. It has passed the Wharton Business School test. It has passed a medical test, and it has passed law school. It didn't have a gold star, but it did better on the writing than math. So we hear you, ChatGPT. And the downside is it can function as kind of your drunk uncle at Thanksgiving dinner, in that it states things emphatically that are true, that are not true, and it doesn't have any references to go with it. So here's an example. In a moment of boredom over the holidays, I asked ChatGPT to write a layoff letter, a heartfelt layoff letter to his or her employees, saying they were going to lay off 10% of the organization. What it spit back to me without any prompts from me was saying that there was empathy for the employees. There was mentions of severance. It talked about a town hall. It wasn't great, but it wasn't awful either. So when you think about how you might be able to use it, and it's free today, we just had a great conversation with Shel Holtz a few days ago on our podcast, EE Voice, that's dedicated to internal comms. And he gives about a half a dozen examples. One was, he's got a wellness newsletter. He had to write an article about tomatoes. He knows nothing about tomatoes. So he actually gave the prompt, to write an article about tomatoes. And he said it saved him about an hour. I think of organizational announcements. They were my least favorite thing to do. Would the organization care if an organizational announcement was written by GPT? I don't think so. I think they'd be fine with it. That said, will it ever get rid of our roles? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We still have the human element. We have the listening element. We need to think about that technology as augmentation.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you the question. You beat me to the punch, Sharon, but I was just wondering, for everyone listening, is this something to be afraid of? It doesn't sound like you see it as something that's threatening. If we embrace it, it could be really helpful.
It could be helpful. I think it's a little bit of both. I think it can be a little scary as well. I was speaking to a company yesterday, and they're actually like pulling in their legal, their HR, and their communications people to say, okay, how do we use this? And can this be used within our company in a really helpful way? And I always say two things I tell my clients about ChatGPT is, number one, it could never, ever write my mom's eulogy better than I did. And number two, it's coming our way, folks. So start paying attention.
Yeah, no, that's good advice. Eoin, just to bring you back into the conversation, I think this is really interesting. You're a tech company, but I'm really interested. Kind of, are you starting to see this, kind of crossover between technology and people? Because you've got responsibility of both, the people side of the business and internal comms. Kind of interested. How do you see, because I heard Sharon call out partnership. Yeah. So really interested in your perspective.
So on the topic of AI, in the Poppulo products, we have been using AI, but I guess the most important takeaways from my point of view is to underline what Sharon said. It doesn't replace a strong person, internal communications expert. But what we have noticed it very effective in doing is leveraging data. And the Poppulo platforms provide incredible amounts of insight and data into your workforce. And using AI to pull that data and position it in a usable way, so an internal comms professional can come along and utilize it in copy and utilize it in messaging. There's huge opportunity there. And anybody who's currently using the Poppulo platform but not aware of the AI function or anything that's referenced here, obviously talk to your customer success partner at Poppulo. But I think that the future in that regard will, of course, help people prep messaging. I love the example about, something we don't know about tomatoes or whatever it may be. But for me, the most important thing is sifting through so much data that's available from wherever you get data is very time consuming. And I think AI has a nice role to play there to kind of position us much more productive to get a message out.
Yeah, no, that's a helpful perspective. I think it's going to be really fascinating to see how it evolves, and it's one of those things, as you said, Sharon. It's come so quickly, and I see someone's put in the chat that there are other versions out there, like I think copy.ai is another one. I like what you said. Not so much artificial. Actually, I think augmenting is a better way to think of it. Actually, how can we leverage this technology? It's already everywhere in far more places than we probably realize. Most of the consumer experiences we have already use AI in a big way. So it's going to be a bit of a legal minefield, I'm sure, inside organizations.
Oh yes, yeah. I loved Maureen Dowd in the New York Times last weekend said ChatGPT is in its toddler phase. And if what we need to be scared about is when it gets to a teenager phase. So
that's a great metaphor. Yeah, and actually, there's a great blog on the Poppulo website, and if you get their newsletter from LinkedIn, you might have had it today. Where actually one of their regular writers has written a piece that actually it gets ChatGPT to write the article, and then he's had a go at editing it. It's worth taking a look if you don't know too much about it. I recommend that. I want to just come back before we move on to the next question as a panel. I want to come back to what we saw in the poll, though. And what we saw was that culture in a hybrid environment is probably the top one that's on people's minds. And I think when we were chatting ahead of the webinar, that's not a complete surprise. I mean, we read a lot about this kind of, this conflict, those organizations who, have encouraged flexibility, leaders who maybe want to see people back in the office. Actually, how do you sustain a culture when people are working much more in a hybrid or even a fully remote way? So, Sharon, maybe I can come to you first, and then, Eoin, given your role, it's going to be really interesting to hear your thoughts on this too. What advice would you have for internal communicators, Sharon? So how can they support their organizations on this one?
Yeah, this one's been a tough one for leaders, right? That, most of these CEOs and executives grew up with a location-based model. So everybody, we're talking not about operational folks, but knowledge workers, but they came into the office, there was an office, everybody came into the same office, and it's no longer location-based, it's employee-based. So again, it's what we do really well is think through that specific employee experience. I'll give you another stat. I think it's EY that was saying that I think around 80% of companies had fully adopted hybrid, but hadn't done a great job of communicating it. So I think there's a huge opportunity to be working in partnership, and you're going to hear this partnership message from me over and over again, of working with HR, bringing people together. A lot of policies haven't even been established. So we've been kind of in this, middle ground over the past year of like, okay, does this work? Doesn't this work? Every single piece of data, if you look at the Gallup poll that's done, hybrid works. People are productive. People are actually doing their work. Employees are happier. So the data is there. It's the culture piece and the leadership in particular, I think, that we're going to have to kind of bring along with us.
Yeah, would you agree with that, Eoin? What's your view? Because you work in DC. That's not where all of your colleagues are. Obviously, you're an international company. What's your perspective?
First of all, personally, I like to think of myself as an in-person person, but I guess you just adapt to what you have. I agree with what Sharon said. So for me, when it comes to setting up a hybrid environment, correct, there's lots of policies and different things that need to catch up. But we've got thereabouts when it comes to the more compliance side of things, taxation side of things. We've had to, right? Because there's clear consequence. What I think is still outstanding, though, is to really make sure that we're engaging people with internal comms and that communicators know their audience. And honestly, here I think we could take a page out of our friends' playbook in marketing and PR to tell a story and to make sure company narrative connects with the audience. So I really think what's important is that we don't just send catch-all communications to reach everybody in the business. We know from a survey we did at Poppulo last year that 52% of employees would prefer communications from their employer to be more personalized. And even within that, 42% of the surveyed employees said if their employer was to simply tailor to their role and their name and address them by name in a communication, it would make them feel better, it would make them feel more connected. So I think back to my point about the infrastructure, about the digital town hall, the physical town hall in its traditional sense is gone. So we have to invest and make sure that we have a way to reach out to people with content that's relevant to them, that we personalize it, that it knows your location, it knows what you're interested in. And then really it's about continuously learning and refining how we communicate. So, we mentioned the analytics, we mentioned AI or ChatGPT. We have to know what to do with the data. Because when I'm talking to people in my network, whether it's communications or human resources, I always obviously reference how brilliant the data analytics is with Poppulo. If you don't know how to use that and you don't have processes around refining how you reach out to people, then it's a little bit redundant. So I'd really love to see internal comms professionals lean into the data more, understand how to use it to inform decisions going forward. That for me is the big piece about creating culture in a hybrid environment. So the first piece is to acknowledge everything's changed and then to really see what's the missing piece. And like I said, I think that in a lot of the compliance things, we've had to do that. But on this communication piece, on this real engagement piece, that's outstanding.
Okay, right. Come on, I'm going to push you now, Eoin. Okay, so you sell this technology, right? You've got all this data. Come on, right. How do you take advantage of that data and the insight it gives you inside Poppulo? Give us an insight. We don't get to see inside. Many of us are familiar with your product, but how do you do this? Give people a sense of kind of where they might start with it.
So recently we've rebranded our entire communications ecosystem. So we've obviously rebranded the global organization to Poppulo. A nice play on that is our internal comms platform is called Pop. So we've got Pop News, right, for our newsletter. We've got Pop TV for our digital signage, our incredible digital signage. We've got Pop Voice for our employee sentiment feedback loop, and so on and so forth, right? Lots of great fun with that kind of branding. But let me talk about Pop News. We've recently got rid of 3 separate newsletters and made one. That's targeted to every employee in Poppulo. Now, let's go a deep dive further. We know that in the States, open enrollment for everything, but we know in the United Kingdom and in Ireland, it's not. Therefore, if you're sitting in Cork or Dublin or London, you will not get that information. Your Pop News, which is standard across the organization, is tailored to you, Joss. It only has information that's relevant to you. Our system is continuously learning about click rates, so we see what's working and what's not. We're able to take a look at each weekly edition of that and decide, let's lean more heavily into, like I said, recognition. We know that we're getting good click-through rates on recognition, but we know overall from data in the industry that recognition articles and focus is really quite low. It's one of the lowest subject areas across the organizations that we partner with. So I guess we're able to make sure in Poppulo that the communication we're sending to you is actually what you want. It's i.e. specific to you because we know who you are and where you are. And then second of all, we know your engagement level. We know if you're clicking it, we know if you're reading it, and we're able to then determine what way we need to change the communication, the subjects that we're sending out there to make sure that it actually engages people and that people feel catered to, that people understand where we're going as an organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the days of treating everyone as being the same are so far behind us. if you're still selling one communication that's meant to fit everyone in your organization. If you've got more than 10 people, forget it, doesn't work. So I think we have to be embracing technology, as you just outlined, to actually make it necessary, relevant, clear, meaningful, value me as an individual, not just a number in the computer system. So I like that. And you also helpfully, moved us to bridged us into the next topic I wanted to go into, which is kind of the challenges that we're seeing that make it harder for internal communicators. So I think you've just given us a great sense of how we can use the technologies available, to increase that sense of connection, which is such an important part. We need to feel part of a tribe. It's in our wiring. It's part of our neuroscience. We need that. It's a safety thing. It's inbuilt in us. So maybe Sharon, I can come to you. Building on what we've already discussed. What are the challenges that you're seeing today that make it harder? And what advice do you have for internal communicators?
Yeah, so I'll come back to the before I do that, I saw something in the chat where someone was asking about what does employee-based look like, and Eoin just described it, by the way. So just to say it's about that persona work and thinking through the different roles. But yeah, there's lots of challenges going on. Someone else also mentioned in the chat about this blurring of lines, that this is contributing to burnout, is that your home and your work, it's supposed to be integrated, but it just kind of gets completely overwhelming. So I think there's the blurring of the lines. Last year, or 2021, I think, was the first year that employee engagement dropped, according to the Gallup poll. I think it's down to 32% now. So you've got a disengaged workforce. I'll be an optimist about that, coming from my PepsiCo days, saying that means you have a 32% engaged employee base that you can talk to. And we did a lot of work with an ambassador program there. And at that point, I think we had, when I left, there was around 5,000 employees who we were targeting as ambassadors, but we were absolutely targeting the most engaged employees. So I think that's the piece of it. And then my final piece is begging people, it's January, to get a comms strategy that ties to your business results. And I've been there. I know how hard it is to find the time to do that. But I'll tell you, it's part of your answer to burnout. Because here's what a strategy does. It ties you in to the business priorities, which means it starts putting some boundaries around it. And it also gets you focused on kind of what your priorities are. I always tell my clients, don't do that in a silo. Go and talk to your HR folks, talk to every single group that you support, and say, what's on your plate for this year? And force them into answering the question, okay, there's 10 things on the plate. If you want to knock 3 of them out of the park, what are those 3? Those go into your plan. Then you go back to your internal clients and say, are we aligned on this? And again, it doesn't mean that you're not going to have some fire drills or things come up or things, kind of go off the rails at times. We're in internal comms, we're used to that. But at least it gives you a plan and kind of a guideline to move forward. And then as Eoin brought forward, you bring the measurement in and you keep going back and having those conversations about where you are on the plan.
Yeah, fantastic. I agree with so much of that. I think the piece around, strategy, business results, absolutely. We've got to move away from focusing on outputs, like, how many emails have we sent? It's the outcomes that it helps to drive.
It's so good.
We're not here. We're an overhead. If we're not helping, deliver those business results, then, what value are we adding? So, I agree with you. And the other point I make on strategy, echoing it, it's choices. It's not just what we do want to do, it's what we're not going to do. You have to make a choice. You can't do it all. You have to decide what you're not going to do as much as what you are going to do. I think that's really crucial. And
when you have that strategic plan, make sure that should, if you're doing a PowerPoint presentation, that should be one of their PowerPoint presentations. That here's the things that we're no longer going to do, because it gets you out of that. The burnout often comes from that tactical, just sort of running from one thing to the next. I remember I had a boss at PepsiCo who told me, you can like arrive at your desk at 7 in the morning. I'm sure you guys can feel this. And you can stay here for 12 hours and just answer emails all day long. Or you can do something that really makes a difference to the organization. Yeah. And that's the stuff that's fun.
Yeah,
like
totally
the creative stuff and changing stuff, that's the stuff that's fun.
Yeah, excite people, kind of give them, help them understand actually where is the organization, where it's going, what role can they play in that. No, totally. What are the things we need to focus on. I just want to acknowledge there's a really fascinating chat going on alongside this, people asking about targeting and data and all sorts of stuff. Before we go to Q&A, there is an option. We'll run a poll. If you would like more information from Poppulo, which can address a lot of these questions that people are raising, they would love to be able to talk to you and answer those questions for you. We probably won't have space to go into the detail today, but just to flag to you that is going to be an opportunity to take up. But I also love the fact we've probably got some people on here, and I can see it actually. We've got people who are answering these questions. They're familiar with Poppulo, what it can do, some of the challenges that you'll face. But I think the technology exists, and there is a way to work with the data challenges and the privacy challenges as well. So just a great conversation you're having. The piece about actually if we target stuff, do people not get the cross silo view? They do both. This is not either or, it's and. So you just have to be choiceful when you're thinking about relevance. The most relevant information is probably the stuff that's closest to people. It's what happens in my locality, in my team, my department, my function. The stuff which is about the whole organization. Well, yeah, I'm interested in that, but actually the two need to link up. So what's happening and what I hear about locally has to have some resonance with what I'm getting at the top level too. Eoin, I'd like to come back to you, and again, linking back to the poll results. One of the challenges that people said they're dealing with this year, it's on their minds, is alignment to strategy. And Sharon just mentioned, aligning to strategy there too. How would you advise people on this call? What can they do to really tackle that challenge?
Clear thoughts from my side. Absolutely underline the requirement to make sure that there's alignment and that everybody understands, right? A great company at the top has obviously its vision, mission, and strategy, and very clear objectives and key results, or OKRs as we call them. That has to be messaged extremely clearly throughout the organization and has to be in line all the way through to your talent management process, or how you sit down with your people leader every year and you set the personal individual objectives. That person has to see the language and the direction in their own personal objective all the way through all of the content they're getting that links up to the very top line of the organization. Now, the other thought that was in my head as Sharon spoke was, and this is a challenge to internal comms professionals, we need to lean into operational comms. We cannot be parallel to operational direction in the organization. Now, a lot of the colleagues joining us today have done that work. I'm still surprised when I'm in my network talking to people about internal comms functions, focusing on very meaningful work with DEIB, with engagement, work recognition, but not focusing on the day-to-day operational business. This is so important. We have to understand that internal comms is a central function. The infrastructure and the expertise we bring is as important to the real core business directions and operational messaging as it is to the extremely important work we do around engaging our people, making them feel at home in our organizations. So leaning into operational comms will help all of these other pieces, because it will be understood that all of my messaging is important and it's all coming from the one source. I think that is a piece that I think we have to in 2023 focus on too.
Yeah, no, I would agree with that. Sharon, do you want to make a follow-up comment on that? I mean, I think it reflects what you were saying earlier. Anything you would add?
Yeah, the one thing I would add, and I love that Eoin, the operational piece is key, and it is about knowing your business. That's the expectation. You have to know the business and you have to know the finances of the business as well, which I know is a bit of a stretch for some of us. I'll admit to that one. But I think it's understanding as the internal communicator, you have permission to go and talk to your employees. And that's where you're going to learn stuff. So if you do have frontline employees, getting yourself into a plant, talking to employees. I'm a big fan of advisory panels of employees, just pulling, a group of cross-sectional employees together that it doesn't have to be super formal. Just once a quarter, go to them, get their impressions, what's on their mind, just find ways to kind of keep your ear to the ground.
Yeah, I completely agree. Some of the most fun I've had, hard to hear sometimes, but focus groups and listening panels. I mean, the insights you get, you'll never get from a survey. You have to listen.
From a survey.
If we get better at listening, we'll do a better job. But, I totally agree with you. I'm keeping an eye on the clock because we're going to go to Q&A in a minute. But one thing I'd like to just touch on before we do that is, the other topic that came up in the poll, probably the third highest score, was around organizational change and changes happening in organizations. There's a lot of it. It's accelerating. It might not be downsizing and layoffs. Hopefully that's good. We saw that was quite a low score. But what would you say is kind of, the opportunity for internal communicators, and Sharon, I'll come to you first. What's the opportunity for them to really help their organization when it's going through change?
I'll tell you, if I was going to put all my eggs in one basket when it comes to internal communications, I would put it in manager communications. In this environment, they are the unlock, and they desperately need you. So I was looking at a recent survey for a client the other day. 69% of managers are uncomfortable communicating with their employees. And 50% of employees aren't clear on what the expectations are of them. So they need you. Another survey, I think it was 90% of employees said their managers were bad communicators. So there's this huge opportunity there. And once you get them enrolled, they can truly be the unlock that you're looking for from a change perspective, from a frontline perspective, from a hybrid perspective. But they need your help to figure out, how do they do great communications with their team? What are the tools? What are the templates that you can develop for them as you're going through this change? And I've seen it. It just is a huge, huge difference when you're reaching out to those managers and really making them feel special. If there's any major change, make sure you're going to them first. You don't want to have someone, a change rolling out in the organization to all employees, and then that employee is coming to their managers like, I don't know what's going on. So they are just so key to any change communications effort.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. Eoin, what would your build be on that in terms of internal communication? How can they help the success or failure of change in organization? I mean, you've just been through it, right? I mean, you've been through a lot of change in your own organization.
Yeah. I think back to partnerships, which was mentioned at the top of the call, right? Yeah. And I'm lucky being a chief people officer where HR and internal comms roll up to me. So we're one team. So I think the partnership with human resources is important from a change management point of view. But I just seen in the chat, Jessica had mentioned we're putting our function leads through IC training at the moment. We really have to, and again, Sharon has mentioned this, invest in leadership, but not only in terms of arming them with information before the wider group, not only in terms of giving them talking points. We have to train them in terms of what real change management is. And if we do that, and we're coupling that with targeted messaging, making sure they have what I just mentioned in terms of communication before the wider group, in terms of talking points, that is definitely a focus area for 2023 as well, to make sure. So yeah, I totally agree with Sharon. We need to invest in leaders.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think its capability is key. And my invitation to internal communicators on this call, if you don't already understand some of the psychology, some of the neuroscience, when we go through change, pick up a book, read about it, learn about it. There's lots about it all over the internet. You will give yourself such an advantage. I'm going to be a little bit cheeky because I've got a chief people officer on my panel, but I'm going to be a little bit critical. Sometimes I think HR functions should be the ones who really, really understand change, but they don't always. There is both a need and opportunity for internal communicators to step into that space. bring some real insight and intelligence, and I think that will make a huge difference. Okay, we're going to go to the Q&A in just a second. Before we do that, I'm going to invite each of you to give me your kind of top takeaways. So if you wanted, all our colleagues who are on this call to take away maybe your kind of top 2 or 3 things that are really going to help them this year, what would they be? And Sharon, you're nodding, so I'm going to come to you first. Hopefully
Okay,
there's a sign you know what you're going to advise them on.
Yeah, I would say, first of all, you are the chief listening officer in your company. So go and listen. I saw in the chat someone asking the question about how do you, onboard these very busy managers. I did a whole project last year for a client where we did the focus groups, we did the survey, we understood where they were coming from, so we can start customizing the content like Eoin talked about. The second thing is, I would say, get creative. I think we get so caught in the tactical piece of it, we forget how much fun we can have, and your employees want you to be fun. So I think to start thinking about how you can play a little bit more with internal comms.
Nice, I like that. Eoin, what would your key takeaways be you want people to go away from this webinar with?
Internal comms, it needs to be central. It needs to be leaning into operational communications. I think that's the first one. And the second one is the data. Really make sure that you are focused on analytics for internal comms. Of course, great, talk to us at Poppulo about how you're, targeting people and not doing one-fits-all comms anymore. But really, really where the trend for 2023 needs to be is utilize the data. I've seen in the chat much earlier on, somebody mentioned about survey fatigue. Well, one solution for survey fatigue is actually look at the analytics, look at the data. What are people engaging in? What do people want to see more of? The answers are in there.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, survey, my theory is most of the time, not all the time, but survey fatigue comes from the organization not coming back and saying, this is what you told us, and this is the action that you took. So if you're not coming and looping back to your employees, yeah, they're going to get exhausted. But if you say, I value your opinion and this is the action that we're going to take, they're probably going to give you the opinion again.
And also, this is what you've said, we can't do it. And here's why. Be transparent with it. It's so important. People value that. They don't always have to get a yes, but they have to get the truth.
Yeah, I think I'll go further and say if you're going to survey people or listen to people and you don't respond with what you're going to do, you might as well not bother. Don't run a survey unless you're going to take action off the back of it, because you're actually creating disengagement because you're not valuing people's opinions. So I think that's really important. Great, thank you very much. Okay, Molly, I think you're going to rejoin us. Going to run a poll. I mentioned it earlier. There's been lots in the chat. We've got a lot of questions. If we don't get to answer them all on this, there is an opportunity. Molly, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, of course. So one of the first questions actually was for you, Sharon, and people just wanted to know what the name of your podcast was. They missed it and they'd love to hear it.
Oh, it's EE Voice. It's on the FIR network, and I can probably drop a link to it in the chat.
That would be great.
And I just dropped the ChatGPT one last night, so it's just out there new.
Brilliant. Okay, so some of the other questions. So the first one is, does anyone have some employees whose roles allow them to work in a hybrid way and others whose roles mean they must work on site only? How do you avoid a sense of them and us, not with just employee comms, but more widely?
That's a good one. That's a great question. And because it's such a great question, I'm going to see if Sharon's got any wise words.
Yeah, so this is about sort of not making it the us versus them piece of it. Yeah, I think it still goes to customizing the information, but I also think there's an opportunity for some collaboration and kind of bringing these different roles together. So it's not just, hey, we're sort of seeing these different the differences, but how do we kind of bring together and understand the needs of the different audiences?
Yeah. Eoin, do you have a view?
The only thing I'd add there is don't ignore it. Don't ignore it. Call it out. Talk about it. I mean, I went through the pandemic being a people operations leader in a grocery retailer where people had to go to work every day and other people were not even going to the office. They were at home. Lean into it. Talk about it. It is what it is. If you're honest with people and you express it clearly, people will accept it.
I think that's true, and I'd echo something that we've already said, which is listen to your colleagues in different roles, in different places. If you've got colleagues in sites who don't have a choice about working remotely, they might work in labs, they might work in production, they might be in the sales, they might be out in the field. You know, they've had an interesting ride over the last few years. Understand what their role is, understand what life's like for them, and then you can tailor your approach with that insight. You won't necessarily get it from a survey. You won't necessarily get it from channels data. You will get it if you go and engage and listen to them. So that would be my advice: is, you know, use that as your foundation and then work your strategy from there. Okay, I know a number of people have asked if this is going to be available. Yeah, absolutely. This is being recorded. It's going to be made available. And if we don't get to answer all of your questions that come in the chat, we'll see with some of those if we can follow up. I dare say, no, Poppulo, there might well be an article coming off the back of this too. So what I'd like you to just do before we go back to Q&A, we've got a short poll here just to pick up. A number of people were curious about how do you manage data? How do you use the technology? Poppulo can help you with that. So just really simple question. You know, would you like to have a follow-up conversation with Poppulo to learn how they could help you? And I'd encourage you, if you don't know much about Poppulo, I think it's well worth your time to do that. Or actually, if you're very happy, you're already a Poppulo customer and your comms needs are being met, then obviously answer no. So for those of you who are putting lots of questions in the chat, how do you do this? How do you do that? How do you work with this? How do you work with that? Trust me, all of your questions, Poppulo and their team have encountered that with clients many, many times over, and they can help. You will find a wealth of information on their website, but it's better to talk, right? It's good to talk. So I would encourage you to do that. So hopefully, you know, you've had a chance to respond to that poll question. So we'll take that down, and then let's just see if we can answer a few more of the questions that we've had in. So I think this is a great one from Nicholas. I'm going to come to you, Eoin. This is an interesting question. So we talked early on about kind of the uncertainty, the burnout. It was one of your major themes. Thinking about inclusivity as well. You've mentioned on some of that. So the question is, how are companies today integrating, promoting, and encouraging psychological safety in internal comms plans, and how does this dovetail with DE&I?
Unfortunately, the data that we have, from our system shows that there, in my opinion, in articles that talk about psychological safety and wellness, and also, to make sure that we're elevating the topics of DE&I, DE&IB. Again, it's something I talk about a lot, and I'm repeating myself. We have to start positioning all of these topics as central topics, and internal comms is the vehicle for us to do that. So if we're talking about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, it has to be tangible for people. There has to be actions that are really action oriented. I work as part of our DEIB Council at Poppulo, a group of really great people. But I challenge them to think about objectives for that group in the same way as an OKR, and with an objective and a key result. And then, I also really make sure that they're engaging our internal comms function, and that there's really key partnership there to bring that message to everybody across the organization. I don't know if I can answer exactly, but I would say I don't think we're doing enough communication about it, to put messaging out there, to talk to people about it, to encourage people to reach out in times of need. That's a massively important part of psychological safety. But I can put my hand up and a HR business partner, employee relations partner will reach out to me. Internal comms can drive that. Internal comms can make sure people know, where do I turn if I have a crisis personally?
Yeah, I think one of the most powerful things I've ever seen is when a leader admits that they got it wrong. Because that vulnerability creates that, that permission for other people to come out and say, yeah, that wasn't great. So I think some of this is actually that, you know, leadership at the top, I think, you know, sets the tone. But I think for internal communicators, it's then, you know, how can you have the mechanisms? We've talked again and again on this conversation about listening, actually understanding what is holding people back from feeling safe if they don't. Trust is so fundamental in our organizations and to our cultures. We need to get that right. Sharon, maybe I can pick up a couple of other questions that Carla's raised. So one is, do you see video as an important vehicle in 2023? And Emily, I think actually Emily has said, do you think intranets are still valuable for organizations, or are we moving away from these kinds of channels? Do you have a view?
Yeah, I mean, I think video will continue to be huge. And I always look at what are people looking at externally and start to mirror those. So again, this is where the fun can come into play. But I think intranets absolutely are gonna stay. But I think when it comes to video and the channels, I would start looking at what your employees are looking at externally. Are they watching TikTok? Are they, you know, that they're sort of shorter, they're fun, they're not super, I think the trend will go away from, you know, super produced videos. I love seeing an executive who's traveling, who's just talking into his phone and giving a 2-minute update if he's with a customer or if he's with an employee on the front line. I think that more sort of casual approach is gonna really appeal to employees. So watch what they're watching externally and then start to mirror that.
I think that's great advice. It's more authentic, you know, if it's not overly produced, and it's cheaper and it's quicker. So why wouldn't you love it? You just need to help the leader be comfortable doing it, which is the fear that holds most of them back, is that they look stupid or they look this or they look that. Just start them off gently. Yeah, they're not going to be, you know, the world's best, you know, kind of video star straight away. So start them off gently, but get them comfortable. It can make a big difference. And not everyone will get there, but I think it's good advice. The other thing you said, I want to bring Eoin in at this point just very quickly. I think intranets are interesting. It's quite an old-fashioned idea. I think what you said, Sharon's right. Look at what's happening outside. It's a consumer grade experience. So I know Poppulo is moving in this direction. It's around multi-channel, omni-channels. How do you create an experience which feels more like the one that you have outside the organization? Eoin, do you want to say anything on that?
Yeah, I think, you know, obviously the huge advantage Poppulo gives you is the opportunity to publish feeds to everywhere, right? You know, currently Poppulo can publish to our app, it can publish to our newsletter, to our intranet SharePoint. Can also publish directly onto Microsoft Teams. In terms of the intranet, what's really important, and Sharon mentioned about looking at what people are looking at outside in terms of consuming comms, we need to also, again, back to analytics. What's working on your intranet site and what's not working? In the past, and the question is an interesting question, because the intranet of the past, where it's kind of lots of policies and procedures to sit there and get zero engagement, that's dead. Future of the internet is somewhere that's useful, that has information I know I'll need. The owners of the internet, the internal comms folks of the world, need to rely on data and analytics to actually provide an intranet that makes sense. And then, like I started out with the feeds topic, publishing the feeds, that there's another space for me to go to read the news that I actually want to see.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. And I think if you can turn your intranet into something which is employee-centric, rather than broadcaster centric. Most old-fashioned intranets, it is one-way communication out from the leadership of the company. We need to turn it around. We need to focus on what does an individual need from their intranet or their comms channels to help them do their job, feel more connected, collaborate with colleagues, be innovative, etc. Okay, sadly, we're out of time. This has been fantastic. From my side, Sharon, Eoin, brilliant. Thank you for sharing all your wisdom and insights. Molly, I'm going to hand back to you just to say a couple of words to close us out.
Absolutely, yeah. So any of the Q&As that we didn't get to, we'll try and get back to you with some answers to some of those over the next few days, so don't worry. So first of all, I just want to take the opportunity to thank the three of you. I know that was, for me, a very interesting and informative chat, and I think from the chat bot, I think everybody thoroughly enjoyed it and found it very valuable. So thank you to the three of you. And also thank you to everyone who joined us today, and we look forward to seeing you soon, hopefully on our next webinar. So have a lovely day, everyone, and we will see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.